everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for our EU Clusters talk this morning. As you all know, part of the European Cluster Collaboration Platform on behalf of DG GROW and the European Commission. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, otherwise you wouldn't have zoomed in this morning, on the 26th and 27th of September, so just a few weeks ago, the European Cluster Conference took place in Prague, bringing together cluster managers, practitioners, policymakers, and all other stakeholders. And it's centered on cluster policies and initiatives and allow the concrete implementation of the green and digital transitions, of course, key pillars of the European Commission's agenda. Now, as we always say, this event is being recorded. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. You can use the chat function or raise a hand to get involved in the conversation. My name is Jennifer Baker. I'm going to be trying to keep us to schedule today because we've got a very packed schedule indeed. And if you want to be on video, just ask us and we will activate your camera. But as I mentioned, this event is being recorded and it may be shared later on the platform, social media channels, or on the website, which is useful because then you can go back and take a look at what was said if you don't catch everything during our session this morning. We have got coming up, of course, we will have, as always, the news of the day, what's happening, and from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform in just a moment. We'll then have an introduction from the European Commission, followed by the highlights of the European Cluster Conference, a short video there, which we will have a look at and see what's going on. And then we're going to have our panel debate discussion. We'll have the takeaways from the European Commission and then our panel discussion where everyone, of course, can get involved and ask questions. And we will wrap up, as always, with the funding opportunities. So a lot to get through, and I'm not going to delay any more of your time. Instead, I'm going to hand straight over to Nina Hopman, who is going to give us all the latest news. Nina.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and welcome everybody to this EU Clusters talk. We have news from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. First of all, we would like to share with you that you can apply for the Cluster Booster Academy. The Academy is a 4-day training event that consists of 2 days online on the 1st and 2nd of December and 2 days in person that will take place in Strasbourg in France on the 2nd and 3rd of March next year. And the Academy is open for cluster managers that are interested in learning from experts, expanding their networks, sharing their knowledge, and that come from different backgrounds, from different levels of experience from countries. We invite you to apply by the 31st of October via the online platform that you can find on the link in the chat. Next, we would like to announce also a new video series that we have in store from the Cluster Exchange. Each week, we will share new introductions to the 2020 partnerships, and you can check out the latest videos that are uploaded on the ECCP latest news page. And you can see a video in the chat, so you can check out the MIDECNEST EU Cluster Partnership. On the 18th until the 20th of October, we will have the EU Singapore matchmaking event. So clusters from Europe go to Singapore to promote information exchange, networking opportunities with their counterparts in Singapore. And for that, the European Cluster Collaboration Platform published an input paper. So in case you're interested in Singapore and cannot join, you can go to the information via the link in the chat and read also the input paper when you're logged in. And last but not least, on the 13th of October, the EEN will host an info day on the Invest EU opportunities. This is a training to provide insights on the different financial instruments that are made available under Invest EU, and it will take place in hybrid form with a maximum of 60 persons on site and 1,000 online. It will take place between 10 and 4:30 on the 13th of October. And if you're interested and you have access to the EN Connect IT platform, you can register there for this training. That's it. Thank you, and back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Nina. Well, as I mentioned at the outset, we are very pleased. We have this morning with us many colleagues from DG GROW, and I'm going to hand over now to give us an introduction to Ulla Engelmann, who's Head of Unit Industrial Forum Alliances and Clusters within DG GROW. So, Ulla, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. So first of all, I would, those of you who participated, really want to thank, but also I would want to thank everybody who was involved in the organization of the cluster conference, including our team in DG Grow. I think we really managed to have a good conference, and I personally and all my colleagues confirmed we felt this positive vibes, the need which all of you had to meet, and this was also then shown by the high participant rate we had, so that we had really more than 500 persons on site. I think you will later on get the exact figures, but and we have opened up then also for online participation. So we had in total then more than 900 registration with participants from over 40 countries, 100 EU cluster partnerships, 20 national cluster association. And before the cluster conference, we had the matchmaking event with 200 participants and more than 550 on-site bilateral meetings. And only when you entered the room of the matchmaking, you could feel this vibe, this busyness that people really wanted to exchange and needed to exchange. So we had the objective for this event to discuss and reinforce the role of clusters in the implementation of the updated EU strategy, leading to green transition, implementing digital transition, and building resilience. And resilience and the reaction to the high energy prices were really key topics which came out through all of the 2 days of the conference. We had a strong focus on Ukraine. We were very happy to have with us from the Ukraine Alliance of Clusters participants, and we had several site meetings. We also saw that the colleagues from Ukraine could make many connections. They were all the time at their stand, being busy, having connections. We also show that what was around, meaning having the exhibition, provided the opportunity to have these bilateral meetings, touching base. This was also very important. We had invited international partners. A Canadian delegation was there, and we also invited them to have a lot of discussions, and we got feedback that many of you were able to touch base with them. So these are the kind of opportunities which were provided by the conference. And then, of course, there was also a highlight when we awarded the prizes for the European Cluster Manager of the Year to Christina from the Agri-Food Lithuania cluster, who is also here in the call, as well as the European Cluster Partnership of the Year to Esri Food, also here. So I think it also shows the importance, the choice of this, of the two of the partnership and the cluster managers, the importance of food security these days, and also within the food security, the work which was done by the clusters together with also the colleagues from EN for the solidarity lanes, for the resilience platform. So I think all this kind of work was demonstrated throughout these days. And what I personally really enjoyed was that we got a lot of very good input, because part of the updated industrial strategy is the work of the Industrial Forum. And we had a lot of discussions where we were feeding the work of the Industrial Forum for the transition pathways. So that's why, and also on the ecosystems particularly, I was in the session where we had really interactive discussions. But then also the other topic on the cross-border and cross-ecosystem investment needs and collaboration possibilities. So this cluster conference really helped to make the case for clusters, making the point, how can they participate in the work for the updated industrial strategy via the industrial forum, helping to feed what clusters are doing to the policymakers. So from my side, this conference was a big success because we got the information and input we needed, but we are looking forward to continue this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulla. You really outlined for us clearly there what was going on, but we're going to now have a quick look at a short video just with some more impressions of the day.
This is a huge honor.
Big thank you for supporting me and believing in the same values.
Well, I hope that's given everyone a flavour of what happened at the conference if you weren't there, and a nice reminder if indeed you were. And I can see many of you in the chat are sharing your names and which clusters you're from as well if you were at the conference. And I'm going to add to that, I'm going to ask those as well. Perhaps you can use one word to describe your main takeaway. What's the one word that springs to mind? And also perhaps tell us a little bit about which trends and new challenges you think the cluster should work on in the coming years. So if you put your thoughts in the chat, I'll have a look at those and we will go through some of those a little bit later on. But now we are going to turn to the takeaways and the perspectives from the European Commission while you're answering those questions. And we have joining us from DG Grow, from the Industrial Forum Alliance Clusters, we have Marek Prezor, who's team leader, and Benoit Esimane, who is policy officer. Marek, I believe you're going to go first. Perhaps I will give the floor over to you and then we can pass to Benoit.
Benoit will go first as he was the main coordinator for organizing this event. So Benoit, the floor is yours and then I take over.
Thank you.
Gentlemen.
Thank you and good morning to everyone. as Ula said, I really hope that you also enjoyed the conference as much as we did. And for us, indeed, there were many takeaways to take from the different sessions we had during the conference. So what we are proposing to do right now is just to go a little bit through the different sessions and give you really only a glimpse of what was discussed, but just to give you a flavor of what maybe you missed because you were attending another session at the same time. So we had also some graphic harvesting, so this should be helping also to help you catching up in case you missed any of the sessions, but also we will make sure that all the presentations that we displayed during the conference will be available on the CCP. We can go to the next slide. So maybe just to give again and to complement what Ula has said in the very beginning, you can see that it was indeed a major success in terms of participation because we had indeed more than 500 participants on the spot. And what is even more important maybe is that from all those 500 participants, we had many EU member states covered. So it really shows that the cluster community, as we call it, the European cluster community, was really there. So we had participants from Austria, from Belgium, from Hungary, from Italy. You can see that Spain, Poland, Czechia, of course, and France were among the most represented, but we also had even participants from clusters from Luxembourg, for instance, which was great to see, from the Netherlands as well. So even some countries that we are usually less in touch with were also participating to the conference. I'm not going to repeat the figures that Ula already shared with you, but we had the partnerships, the national cluster associations also had the opportunity to meet with each other. We had just a little bit less than 100 participants also following online. And in addition to the meetings, the sessions, the side events that were foreseen in the program, we also had indeed 30 exhibitors in the exhibition space. And I think during the 2 days of the conference, we saw many people stopping by, exchanging. So in addition to the meetings, let's say, that were planned and that were set by us as part of the program, we also noticed that there were so many exchanges taking place at bilateral level, let's say, between the participants. And this was also really good to see. So we really hope that you also enjoyed and made many contacts and had a really fruitful discussion bilaterally during this conference. We can go to the next one, and I think I hand over here to Marek.
Yes, indeed, with all these people on site, we had a chance to listen to our speakers and people who wanted to share with us their knowledge and intelligence. And we started with, of course, the voices from the presidency of the Council of the European Union, from the Czech presidency, who recall the priorities of the Czech presidency, which were related to energy security, refugee crisis, and strengthening defense capabilities and cyberspace security. So all this, as well with the actions which the European Commission is taking in this dimension, we then had the opening debate, and here we did it deliberately to invite the person from a very well established cluster policy area, Lower Austria, Simon, who shared with us the experience, and Kristina from Lithuania, who is very much right now building in a dynamic way the cluster capacities in Lithuania. And having these two persons and led moderation by our head of unit, Ula, allowed us to come up with one quotation. I want you to repeat it. Clusters have not been created to follow trends. Clusters are simply frontrunners. So once again, clusters are frontrunners, and out of this discussion, it was very clear as well that for the matured clusters, and here I want to do some promotion as well from the paper which was produced by 3 regions where cluster policy is very well developed. I mean, in Denmark, in Lower Austria and Catalonia, they came together and developed a paper, Dilemmas of Mature Clusters, which they come up with ideas for mature cluster, how they can reinvigorate, can re-establish themselves in order to cope with all the challenges that we are having. As well, Christina, who is representing the dynamic cluster developing, where you need to learn from the mature cluster, but as well bring this dynamics, enthusiasm, and the collaboration between them for us would be an objective in building up the cluster policy in the whole European Union. The next slide, please. And then we had the panel discussion, where very clearly one slide I want to show here, which sort of summarizes what is expected and what the clusters can do. So basically, as frontrunner, they need to catalyze change very quickly, at speed, in scale, and times of crisis, and this has shown it. We have proofs for this. We had proofs for COVID. We had proofs for helping in vaccines. We have proof for this as well in Ukraine, where since March the Ukrainian clusters had really gathered together, and even if there are some competitors before, they are working together. So it shows that in times of crisis, clusters and networking are the ones who catalyze change, orchestrate multiple stakeholders, and when talking about the green digital transition, they are definitely innovation brokers and link problem owners with solution providers. If they get financing, if they get proper reskilling and upskilling, they can make a difference in system-wide transformation, not only sectoral, and then power our industry for zero. So next slide, please. If you look at the discussion of the panel, where we have all challenges, it's very much focused on energy, as you saw, but we did it deliberately because energy is now very much on topic, energy efficiency, cost of price of energy, and we saw on the base of this example as well a big issue in shortages or disruptions in our supply chain, and the presentations and discussions clearly led that we need to work on our with solidarity, on our self-dependence, on our capacity to have to be less independent. And in this case, it was the solar panel production, where we are very much dependent as well on China. So even if we are, so we should be aware of not changing one dependence into another dependence. But for this, we would need big investments. We would need capacities at high level. So the projects of European interest were mentioned, state aid, and I think very concrete suggestions, accelerated grant instruments, guarantees from the state, and tax credit systems were mentioned. So then we went how to do this transition in practice, and then the next panel, I will give the floor to Benoit. Benoit?
Yes, thank you. We can move to the next slide. So on the second panel session, indeed, the purpose was really to try to raise awareness about what we are doing within the framework of the Industrial Forum, and namely on the development of transition pathways for the different industrial ecosystems. So we had this second panel session with Ula and Antonio presenting a little bit the overall context, so what the transition pathways are, how we are building them, and Ula giving a little bit the update of where we stand with the different industrial ecosystems. And then in this very same panel session, we had two examples, two practical cases showing already how the green transition is being implemented in the region of Värmland in Sweden by Sandra Sundback, who is also here with us today, and Thomas Roch from the Automotive European Network, Cluster Network, was also giving some indications about how this particular industrial ecosystem, how this sector is preparing, is implementing these changes to become greener, to take into account digitalization, and also strengthening the resilience. After the first day, so those two panel sessions and then the awards ceremony, we can move to the next slide. We had the second day where we also had a very busy program with 6 different breakout sessions taking place. The first breakout session was devoted to upskilling and reskilling. And there it was really interesting because also this year is the European Year of Youth. So we wanted also to hear from a young cluster manager from Czech Republic to give her insight about how cluster can be attracting talents and how young cluster managers could be shaping the future of clusters. So we also had a connection directly with SMEs, with the winner of the pitching session at the EU Industry Days, Dimitri Ionescu, who was also explaining how young SMEs are trying to, let's say, find their place in the business market. And we had different exchanges also with Ukraine Cluster Alliance in terms of building relationship around creativity in this session. If we move to the second breakout session, this one was focusing on internationalization of European SMEs. And on top of the presentations that we had from 2 European cluster partnerships and from one cluster specifically, showing what they did with the support they had in the framework of the program, of the COSME program. We also had a very nice insight from Canada, but also from Japan, with the help desk establishing connection between European SMEs and Japan, and presenting also the mobility program, and also some insights about what the cluster support program in Canada is focusing on. So you have here on the slide a little bit the main themes on which they are focusing and the discussion and exchange that we had with them. In the third breakout session, this was a different format because we had a work cafe type of session. And here we were really active discussing per industrial ecosystems, how clusters could contribute to the development of the transition pathways. So we had very rich exchange, unfortunately a bit short on time because it was a very intense session, but limited in time. And we are really looking forward also to follow with each of those individual clusters who participated there, how they can contribute to the different steps of the transition pathways for those industrial ecosystems during the stage of development. Marek?
Then we had the sessions on supply chain. So we discussed as well what lessons we learned from particularly from the lockdown. So creating the main cross-sectoral collaboration, trust, mapping, connecting, preventing, preparing. All of this comes together in this session. So diversifying, linking, and networking is important. And I think to mention the Ukrainian presentation, where they actually call for orders, call for collaboration, call for integrating them into the European value chains. Next slide, please. And then we had as well the session as well with World Cafe format on integrating clusters into the work on regional economic development. And here again, what is most important is actually be active at the policy level, be active in design the policy, in implementing the policy with policymakers. So going ahead and be active, be co-creating this economic development in the region. Next slide, please. And last but not least, of course, the interregional cross-border collaboration, where you need to find common interest, common ground to collaborate together. We have at this moment instruments like interregional innovation investment, like Euroclusters, like Interreg Europe, bringing together, but as well in Horizon Europe, you can find elements where you can get consortia clusters together and apply and create collaboration. So next slide. Thanking everyone for participation and being active, being co-creating the content of this. we have capacity, we have knowledge, we have network. We through all these elements which we mentioned, the supply chain resilience, the skills, the internationalization, involvement in regional economic transformation, in transition pathways, in internationalization, we can all go together and lead the green transition, accelerate digital transition, and build resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark and Benoit. You've certainly packed a lot into 10 minutes, 2 full days of schedule from the conference. So well done to you, and thanks for sticking to time. I see in the chat as well that Laura, Sandra, Lucia, all saying the same sort of thing about what they found most invaluable, and that was the connection, the face-to-face connections, the re-establishing contacts. We're panel debate now today. You've heard the names mentioned many times already, but I would invite all the panel speakers to now switch on their cameras. We have Christina Samoksnaite Alashini, who is the General Manager of Agri-Food Lithuania, and as we heard, winner of the European Cluster Manager of the Year. Verla de Graaf is Program Manager at Flanders Food and winner of the European Cluster Partnership of the Year. Antonio Novo probably needs no introduction, President of the European Clusters Alliance, and Inés Lecorvec is Managing Director at the Council of European Bioregions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Let's see if we have you on screen. Do we have you all cameras on? Just so we can all say hello. Christina, let me start with you. Give me your takeaways from the European Cluster Conference. Give me your thoughts. What do we need to do? What are your big concerns at the moment?
Well, first of all, hello, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everyone again and to see how all the clusters are actually coming back and see the need to reflect, and everyone is agreeing on basically the same thing, collaboration and networking. I looked through the video that we just saw, and once again, all my emotions came back. As you've seen, I could almost talk. Well, my voice is still not very good from the conference, but I'm coming to better things. But lots of good and important things have already been said by Ula and by Benoit and Marek. And I just would like to repeat one more time that we all agreed that clusters are playing crucial role in the EU twin transition and making value chains resistant. So the most important roles, as we can see, that clusters can develop regions. They're impacting the economy through the strengthening and rebuilding local and national and European value chains, and supporting what's most important, strategic sectors. Another thing is smart specialization is being developed already, are approved in many member states. So we need to remember that clusters could take a lead role for implementing smart specialization strategies in their countries. And this is also very important. And as I said, driving the twin and green digital transition, also circular economy, enhancing interregional, international collaboration. We've seen it's fantastic that so many different clusters from different countries, not only from EU, gathered for this conference. And it was very good. Everyone wants to collaborate and cooperate. And that's what we really agreed on, that people come first. People meeting people, only from people ideas, everything starts. And another thing is to promote cross-sectoral, to cross-cluster, cross-border, cross-ecosystem collaboration. This is the basics from what we need to be starting, working for the most important European value chains to make them resilient. We need to take lead and encourage also other clusters to innovate in value chains, not to be afraid to take the new ways, and of course to contribute to the transition pathways in that way. Encourage to develop of business models consistent with the value chain processes. And what's also very important to underline that we need to work together and develop new cluster initiatives, which are very important for the new direction in the economic policy. And by sharing good stories, use cases, it is very important to show that actually clusters are working. They are the actual engine of the EU economy. And the countries who do not have cluster policies yet, working together on the good examples we could create or help create the other countries, the cluster policies. So this is very important too. And another very important thing which was underlined and we talked a lot, that was that we already see that EU programs have had a real impact in helping clusters to access funding and then fostering interregional collaboration between clusters. So there was many doubts how we can proceed and whether we're gonna be seeing new funding opportunities just for the clusters. And it is very important here to continue the discussion and see maybe we can collaborate on different initiatives. Maybe we can collaborate on different funding. Maybe we can do even different initiatives cross countries, cross continents, and see what other funding opportunities we can find.
Well, thank you very much, Christina. Let's turn now, let's hear from Vela. Let's hear your thoughts from Flanders Food.
Good morning from my side. Happy to be here. As said, I'm Vela de Graaf from Flanders Food, a Flemish agri-food cluster in Belgium. And we also coordinated the EST food project, where you can see on the slide the main outcomes. But thinking back to the cluster conference, as Christina mentioned and added to it, a lot of interesting and relevant things have already been said. And I will not repeat on those. What I liked a lot is that clusters are indeed put on the stage as being the agents of change, and I really believe that. I think we all do. Clusters can really make the difference in rebuilding these ecosystems, in promoting resilience, in addressing the digital and green transition. And I had a feeling that a lot of new initiatives are being launched, but at the same time, that a lot of this potential of clusters is not being fully used yet. And I don't mean that clusters are only looking to get more funding out of the Commission, but also we can provide a lot of input to shape those new initiatives. For instance, in helping to shape the transition pathways, in engaging on which mechanisms of funding systems could really benefit clusters. Because with all the new things that are being launched now, it's often looking and seeing, okay, will this work for us? This is an interesting program, but it doesn't really fit with our cluster reality. It's not always immediately clear what we can use for reality. And so my message would be really use this potential of clusters, especially of the established cluster networks, for instance, the S3 partnerships, where clusters that have the same vision on a specific sector linked to the smart specialization strategies have already come together. I think this can be a really added value to use more of this potential of these cluster networks to further shape the relevant initiatives that are being launched at this moment.
Well, thank you. I don't think anyone would disagree about the need to use potential, so that's a good comment. Antonio, let me take your perspective. Tell us a bit about what you find as a top priority at the moment.
So, hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer. For me, it was a great experience also to have a full morning dedicated to networks, meta networks, if you want, no? Not only a national or regional level, but also a sectoral level. As Berly said, we are clearly benefiting from organizing ourselves through those networks, and I think it is the real advantage for us to have some kind of common voice stable structure to collaborate between us. So it's the next steps, and we need to reinforce them and to use them for really be where we should be. Meaning on the, for example, in the EU Industrial Forum, contributing to all the different task forces, not only the task force on transition pathways, but also to that on the cross-border, cross-ecosystem, many opportunities, needs, and plans, you know. So this is the main takeaway for me. This is working. The organization of cluster on networks is important. We are growing, and I look forward for next steps on this kind of common activities between clusters for benefiting our members, not the cluster themselves, but the SMEs and the real economy. And in that line, and answering the question on transition pathways in the chat, we plan to invite, I don't know if as ECA or as ECCP or as either, but we want to organize meetings dedicated to every one of the ecosystem and exploring also cross-ecosystem linkages, you know. And in that sense, I want also to repeat that we are working now in the most actual challenge, no? That is our capacity to help to contribute to the European economy in our readiness for the current crisis, or that could come in the coming months, meaning we are in an economic war that is a reality. Our society is suffering, and we need to move our members and our organizations in order to align our capacities with what is needed. And so it's not just a generic idea, it's something that we need to do just now. And I think that the European Cluster Conference was the axis point, I would say, to really jump in our capacity to act together. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Crisis is, of course, one of those key words that we keep hearing again and again. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But first, let me give the floor to Anais. Council of European Bioregions Networks is something you know about as well. Anais, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I have the difficult job to close this, first round where you all said everything almost that had to be said. So what else can I add on this? I think maybe what I would say is just continuing on what Antonio was saying is obviously, first of all, it was a great event, great to connect in person. It's said in the chat, obviously, seeing each other after such difficult years and knowing new people was really great. But as Antonio just said, I think our network, obviously, you can see on the map, we're a little everywhere across Europe. Actually, we maybe have grown after the cluster conference because there are new cluster interested in joining us. And as Antonio said, joining forces. But for me, it's really about, after this conference, hearing a lot about the talent, for example, which is a key issue in our ecosystems, the talent gap. We've also heard a lot about the cross collaboration, cross sector, cross. So we need to continue collaborating, even if it's not necessarily in just our ecosystems. That is very important. I also think clusters are solution finders. So during the crisis, I think we got to know a lot of excellent crisis managers. So finding solutions, for example, in the health sector through COVID, now with the Ukraine crisis, now with the energy crisis. So I think clusters are really good at that. But as a follow-up of what Antonio said, I think we need to get out also of our, let's say, cluster world, because it was really nice to see our cluster managers around. But we need to convince others that we are really good at finding solutions. And maybe that means that for a next cluster conference, we could have more, let's say, external actors represented, more external European Commission also represented, because I know the team of Ula and all DG Grow, I think, are now very convinced that we can really bring solutions to the table, but maybe that could be nice to be extended to other DGs that need also to see that we can really bring the innovation, bring we know where the SMEs, where the innovators are. And I think this is quite important to enlarge, let's say, our scope of action and the voice that we have, and maybe through the networks, as Antonio just said, this is something that can be done also with the help of DG Grow and the unit that is being always behind us and taking us into account a lot. So maybe that could be, let's say, for the next steps, for me, it's to enlarge the voice of the cluster towards external actors.
Well, thank you. That's certainly a good call to action to get the voices out there of the clusters to sort of expand communications. Let me remind everyone who has joined that they can ask questions of panelists in the chat. Please just pop them in there. Or if you want to put your camera on or put your microphone on and ask the question yourself, just raise your hand and we'll allow you to do that. But Christina, let me come back to you. We mentioned this crisis situation. And of course, Inés is saying we're talking about planning for the future. How difficult is it to do that? I mean, we seem to be almost in a state of perma-crisis over the last few years. Is it very difficult to change the wheels while the bicycle is still moving, is one of the expressions I've heard. How do we cope?
Well, first of all, we need to understand, and I think everyone here does, that the economy will never be the same. So everything is changing, like you just said, and all the means that we are trying to gather together, that's for the contribution of our single market to continue building our single market and working for the most important European value chains to make them resilient. And this is a hard job actually to do. Again, we need to understand that we're building strategic autonomy for European ecosystems. And what we have seen, for example, from the crisis, that we need to fight for example, food insecurity, which was unbelievable, or we never thought that something would come up like that. And now we are facing the situation. So again, we need to find new ways, thinking out of the box to deal with those challenges. So there is a need, how I say, to adapt and to regroup. And how we do it, that's again the same and the same. I'm seeing this word in the chat, collaboration, togetherness, coming together and working together. So this is the only way. And like Antonia said, mega networks, meta networks, meta collaboration. And we've been talking also with the European Clusters Alliance with Antonio, for example, that maybe it would be useful to collaborate, for example, on the levels of the meta networks as for the ecosystems like agri-food, automotive. We've already heard that automotive is collaborating in its own ecosystem as a mega network. So maybe it would also be useful to have those meta networks working together inside and finding solutions, and then collaborating between also and sharing. It's again that we are talking about, I like the term collective knowledge. So when we can share the knowledge, we can actually use it, because just knowing things, it does not help. We actually need to apply it to the everyday tasks on what we are working. And only in that way we can build the actual resilient, innovative ecosystems. There is just no other way. And another thing, what we probably should be talking about, also making strategies on our know-how export, how many of the innovations we are keeping in our market, or how many we're exporting, and things like that. So this is just, the top of the iceberg, what I'm saying, but these are very important things.
Well, Viola, Christina there said that the European economy will never be the same again, but sometimes at times of change and points of change, there's the opportunity to actually change things for the better, or to take that as an initiative, as a lever to do things better in the longer term. Do you agree?
Well, I agree that change is a permanent element of our economy, of our society at the moment. And we as clusters should help prepare our companies to be prepared to deal with this change. You can call it resilience, you can call it flexibility, but it means that you have to be prepared for whatever is coming next, if it's something expected or unexpected. And this requires a mentality shift in companies, but it also requires other clusters to really listen to the policies that are being rolled out on the European Commission now, and help our companies to translate this to how they can really adapt and apply these strategies. So translating these policies into bite-sized, real innovation steps companies can take to work on this digital transformation, this green transformation, to build on this resilience. And I agree with Christina that connecting knowledge is a key element in this, because we're all working on this, we're all doing interesting projects, we're all gathering experience. And it would be a waste if we're all doing that side by side and not connecting and putting our shared knowledge together. And I believe one of the ways is indeed building these networks of clusters where we can combine this information, learn from each other, and then take this expanded knowledge back to our own companies to help them. And then again, it's a continuous motion that you then have to strengthen each other as clusters, and by doing so, strengthen our companies back home to build this resilient European economy.
Antonio, I see you've just put there in the chat about the session at the European Week of Regions and Cities. How important is it to get that sort of buy-in at different levels across Europe? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, that's critical. We need to go out of our zone of comfort, you know, the area where everyone speak about cluster, and explain what clusters could do in other environments, I would say. And this is one example. Okay, we are going to speak with the cities, the regions, the civil society about what can we do. I think it was Christina who told us during the parallel session on Monday morning that it's not about cluster meeting regions, it's about cluster leading regions, perhaps, no? So we need to be bold and to really go there and explain about our capacities. And I think that I need to say that Euroclusters are also a very good tool or yes, opportunity, I would say, at this moment. No, Eurocluster are the new structure that could help us to build those trans-European networks. I don't know if it's only about for sure, it's not only about Euroclusters. We need to be open and to integrate in those vertical networks everyone wishing to contribute, but they could be kind of the main structure during the coming years, if they are willing. So this is an invitation for the Eurocluster members and leaders to look at the rest of the cluster at the European level and look for synergies, you know, and to launch the project not only as closed ecosystem, as a personal recommendation, but to actively promote linkages with the rest of the Euroclusters and the rest of the networks. I think it's kind of a not so common approach, but it will really help us to build during the coming years those very, very strong real networks. I know, and you know, and it's kind of what the Canadian has called the superclusters, but in a mixed approach, top down, if you want, because Euroclusters is a call from the European Commission and is funded by public money, but also bottom up, if we are able to, around them, create those very strong networks. Thank you.
Well, Anesa, you're hearing there that we are trying to do some of this outreach and get other people involved.
Yeah.
But I want you, as a sort of a last reflection, a more sort of overarching thing is, we talk about the green and digital transitions, but they're not just digital for the sake of it or green for the sake of it. It's about the actual impact on the average European at the end of the day. Do you think that clusters are helping industries and sectors change their thinking on that?
Yeah, definitely. And maybe I can just also just pick up on what Antonio has said to give the example. We as CBER are in one Euro cluster that is actually bringing two sectors together, so bio and manufacturing. So here, a very cross collaboration we've been working on since quite a few years with other actors. So this is why I always come with for me, the clusters are connectors. We really are in touch with the regions, local, regional, national, EU authorities, the big industry, the smaller players, and so on. So I think at the end of the day, having this role is obviously very important, because this actually gives the citizen at the end of the day solutions, because the SME understands where they can find other to connect, to find solution. For example, during the COVID crisis, to bring on masks, to find the vaccines, to match together. So I really think there's a benefit, but as I said before, it's very important that we ask a lot to clusters, we bring solutions, but it's also very important to have the means to do so. So we grow, we've been in many battles, I would say, in the last years, and still here bringing solutions. But obviously this means also resources that are important, because the Euro clusters, as Antonio said, there are many of them. I think it's very interesting that we all connect together. Like I mentioned the biomanufacturing one, but some of our CBER members are also in the digital health. So again, two sectors together. And at the end of the day, obviously European citizens will benefit if we have more potential to work and connect with others, and to make, let's say, great again the single market, and work more all Europeans together, so we don't depend so much always on others from the rest of the world.
Well, thank you very much.
Summarize.
And you mentioned resources, so I think it's a perfect time, because I wish I had more time to speak to all of you. It's been really interesting, and thank you very much. And thank you to those who are putting comments and so on in the chat as well. I hope people have time to read them. But we're going to wrap up there and turn finally to our funding opportunities. Nina, welcome back. Please tell us about the funding opportunities that are coming up.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the panelists for the recap as well from the European Cluster Conference and the next steps for the clusters. If you go to the Funding and Tenders portal of the European Commission, there might be some interesting opportunities for clusters. You have a call under the Horizon Research and Innovation Action, which is called Enhanced Preparedness and Management of High Impact, Low Probability or Unexpected Events. This is a funding for projects that should support the anticipation and management of shock events through improving planning processes, establishing broader risk uncertainty frameworks, enhancing business resilience and responses to shocks and communications. And there are several possible outcomes of the project. Some of them are listed here: improved methods or tools for decision-making, improved mapping of the socio-economic systems and interdependencies, as well as an improved preparedness at individual, local, or government level. The deadline for this call is until the 23rd of November, and you find the info via the link in the chat, and you see the topic ID here in the screen. Another call is boosting awareness raising for mainstream enterprises to work with social enterprises. So this action should support the creation of local and regional partnerships to improve the collaboration between mainstream businesses and social economy entities, so that the action can help to engage with a range of social economy suppliers and embed them into the value chains from mainstream businesses. Deadline for this call is the 7th of December, and it's a call under the Single Market Program with the topic ID that you see here on the screen. And please check out the call via the link in the chat. And there's a call for specialized education programs and modules in key capacity areas. So this is an action to support the cooperation between higher education institutions and the private sector. And the chosen project shall deliver a tertiary degree education program that look into data, Internet of Things, AI, blockchain, cybersecurity. So these key capacity areas for the digital transition, plus interdisciplinary courses so that we have the application in the industry. The deadline for this call is the 24th of January next year, and it's a call published under the Digital Hero program. We have the topic ID here and the link in the chat. And there's also a call open for a cluster partnership. The In Orbit project has an expression of interest for innovation intermediaries. It offers a Train the Trainer program for business support organizations and innovation intermediaries with interested in space. So they support you to organize and launch space initiatives for local startups, SMEs, innovators to develop their activities. And this expression of interest is open for clusters, incubators, and accelerators, as well as startup associations and networks. It's an open call running, so please express your interest via this link you see here in the screen and in the chat. That's it, and back to you, Jennifer.
Well, thank you very much, Nina. I hope that's been of use to everyone. There's also a lot of links in the chat, so I encourage everyone to click on those. The next event will be on the 19th of October, focusing, as you might expect, on the Ukraine situation, what can be done regarding business integration and recovery. So don't forget to register for that and keep an eye out for the recordings of today's event. And have a lovely day, everyone.